So you were on. You can follow some other. Just those.
That's awesome.
We had it out there, but everything was kind
Is there energy?
Yeah, yeah, right. That's how we got it. Okay, I think we're ready to get going. Yeah, Steve, we done for.
Okay.
Brett coming tonight. Well, thank you both for making time to come.
You guys do your work.
You're recording.
Oh, we're recording?
We're recording. Okay.
Welcome, everybody, tonight to joint Board of Selectmen and Comprehensive Plan public hearing. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, with that, we'll hand it off.
Great.
CRC.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Farmer. I'm the chair of the Comprehensive Plan Committee. We're made up of several members, Cindy Egan, Steve Hewins, Carl Coates, Wendy Case, and also Jake Williams on the select board, and also Brett Parker. We've met numerous times over the past 18 months. And we've worked heavily with Donna, who is our advisor, and has done several of these plans to do that. I've gotten a number of different feedbacks to put together the plan. The procedure was that we would prepare drafts. They then get submitted to the select board for review. We would get great comments back to that. And then do an additional draft, as well as talking with stakeholders and various things. We've had several meetings over the past couple of years in Quasic and Rangeley and various departments to get a lot of feedback there. So Don is going to present tonight kind of where we are at. We did a full comp draft, which was posted 30 days ago. And per state law, we are to have a public hearing to allow for additional comments and those type of things. Certain parts of the comp plan have already been submitted to the state for review and comment, so that we can get everything back, make adjustments, and then hopefully, if everything tracks, then we will have the vote on the comp plan in September 9th. I believe.
August 19th.
August
It's the
19th.
Updated
It's
time.
the updated, okay. So August 19th. So, how many are familiar with the comp plan and how many are familiar with the comp plan? Okay. And how many got we sent a mailing out to every post office box in there. Did everyone get a chance to see what I call the Reader's Digest version, the USA Today version? So that gives you a little bit of an idea. So really what's important for us is we want to hear your feedback. We want to hear what you think. If there's anything that is totally off or totally off the wall with, we've been working with our groups, talking to people, and feedback from the select board, and if we're getting something wrong, we definitely want to know it, because this is a great venue for that there. If you think we're on the right track, if there's things that need to be done, let us know. For those of you, I kind of try to explain a comp plan is more kind of a skeleton. It's kind of a general skeleton of vision where you want things to go. Then after that, your ordinance is the implementation of your various boards and various boards and groups that work on these things will work on fleshing that out more of how to lay things out. We've tried really hard with the comp plan to tie into where it made sense with reference to state statutes, so that it basically doesn't just die on the vine. It doesn't sit on the shelf and create dust. It's tied into things if things change on the state level that we have to be in compliance with, that we've referenced that section so that it can follow through. So Don is gonna walk us through a presentation, and then obviously we want to hear your comments, and we appreciate you taking time on a summer evening to come out. I guess it's still spring till Saturday, but to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for coming, one of the first warmer nights of the season. So this plan is 125 or so pages. I'm not gonna go through, I can't hit every single point on that. But what I'm gonna try and do is give you a good overview of what it is that, of what's included in the plan, and then we'll have some time at the end. You can ask questions, and if you have some more specific questions, we can get into that. So, this is one of my favorite views of Rangeley. So why we plan? It's a periodic opportunity for the community to get together and talk about what's going on, what the town should look like, where it should be going. It identifies obstacles. It identifies opportunities. And so the plan works to gather what those things are and put it all together in one document. There's a number of ideas that are suggested in here, and again, they're ideas. All of this, everything that's included in here is gonna take more discussion. This is just a very high level overview of what we think needs to happen based on what we heard from all the various public comment that we got. So it doesn't, when this goes to town meeting, it does not automatically happen. Then we sort of go back to the beginning and look at each particular item and decide whether or not it should be done. And that's when you start getting into the details. The comprehensive plan does not get into details. It makes the town eligible for grants. So there is preferential treatment that's given for towns. You are not required to do the plan, but if you don't have it, there are certain grants that you're not eligible for. And if any of you have ever written grants, there's extra points for if you have a grant, and what they're looking for is that it's found to be consistent with state law. There's one bulleted point in here that I left out that's extremely important, and that's that any new zoning amendments need to be consistent with your comprehensive plan. So if you want to change things, you need to have the backup to do that in your plan. So the process we used, we had a number of meetings. We met in this room at the end of January in 2004. And then we held a very similar meeting in Owasso. We met with business people, we met with the surrounding plantations, we met with the surrounding communities. I had a number of one-on-one conversations with different business owners, different people in town, as did a number of the committee members. This was the committee that worked on this was a very hands-on committee. They went out, they collected a lot of data, they wrote certain chapters. So there's been a lot of discussions that have gone into where we are today. We did a couple of surveys. And we also, AVCOG, the Androscoggin Valley Regional Council of Governments, provided the most up-to-date data that they have, because that's what they're very good at. And they also did all of the mapping thing that they're very good at. They're also very good at planning, but they were kind of busy. So, so we partnered with them on this. So there's an appendix B in the plan, and that appendix has minutes, has whatever the result of all of those meetings. So if you want more information on what happened at those meetings, they are included in appendix B. So what did we learn? I think first and foremost, we learned that Rangeley needs more housing. Rangeley is no different than any other community in this country. You've got a housing problem. We learned that businesses have done quite well since 2020. But that there's a lack of housing makes it difficult for the businesses to bring in new workers. You get that so that they have a place to live. We learned that protecting natural resources is critical. There's no surprises there. We learned that the population is growing slightly. The natural population, meaning that more people are born than die, that's not growing. That's actually going in a negative direction, but there have been some new folks that have moved in. And we have learned that the population is aging. That's no news for the state of Maine, but in Rangeley, it's a good 10 years more than Franklin County as a whole. And I think it's something like 15 years more than the state as a whole. So, so that presents its own set of problems. We learned that household sizes are going down. That is a national trend that's been happening for years, that where there might have been large families living in a house may only have 1 or 2 people living in it now. We learned that transportation options are limited if you don't have a car, that the area is very car dependent. We all know about the extreme weather events that happened, and we needed to address them and how frequently they happen and what happens, how the town responds. We also did some talking with the plantations and the surrounding communities, as I said, and we learned that there are some opportunities for regional cooperation. So first of all, the housing needs. First and foremost, that was always the first thing that we heard, was that we need more housing. And it's not just any housing. We need housing that's attainable, meaning that someone who works here can afford to live there, can afford to live in that unit, that they can also afford to eat and, you know, do all of the things that they need to do. So what we learned is that we need a diversity of housing types. We need housing for seasonal workers who come in. We need housing for permanent, long-term, new families coming in. We need rental units. We need homeowner options. So we need a broad base of housing. So this was a question that we asked. I don't know if any of you were at the January 31st meeting in 2024 in this room, but we did some instant polling. And so how you do that is you log into this system with your phone, and we asked a number of questions. This was a big surprise to me, that the type of housing that people said, the number one type of housing that people said was that we need apartment buildings. So in a community that is primarily single family homes with some duplexes, there's definitely interest in having different types of housing for different needs. So, as I said, we come up with some ideas. We have a few different categories of ideas. The first thing that a planner does when you go into a community like this is you look at the existing zoning. And you see how that zoning is working. Are there features in that zoning that might actually be barriers to new types of housing or anything that you're looking at? So I did that. So what we came up with is that we need to do some adjustments to the zoning, having smaller lot sizes, And that's where I want to bring your attention. I know you're not going to be able to see this now, but if you are interested in this, I suggest that you take a look at it. Because the reduced size, when there's crosshatch area here in downtown, another one here. As you're coming into downtown, and then this smaller commercial area right up here in Midtown. So, these areas are proposed to be downzoned, meaning that they would go from the residential district to the village district. And what that does is it cuts the minimum lot size in half. So take a look at that. Also, take a look at this note right here, because what this note says is that they're advisory. These lines are advisory. What we did was we took the water and sewer lines, we put them on a map, we had the zoning, and then we started drawing lines around where the existing water and sewer are, because we really like to keep the growth concentrated in the village area so that it keeps this area a lot less, it keeps it undeveloped as much as possible. I'll be at this map after the meeting, so you can take a look at that and I can answer any questions that you have. Another thing, so business owners told us that they needed, housing for their workers. And some businesses have already just gotten different types of housing so that they can bring folks up, tell them here's your apartment, here's your house, whatever. But not all of them can do that. So there is a provision in the ordinance right now that allows the residential and the commercial to be on the same lot. But what the plan proposes, but you also have to double your minimum lot size. So that makes it difficult to get both of them on the same lot, where there might otherwise be room to get the housing and the parking that you need. And that we want to allow a wide range of housing, not just single family and duplex. The plan talks about lodging houses and tiny houses and a lot of different options that we might not have thought of last time the plan was done. But at this point in time, the demand is such that they would serve a need. We also want to incentivize lower housing costs. So part of how you do that is with higher density. And so we've got that in the first bullet point. One thing that we talked about was a transfer of development rights program. It's an old planning concept. You will find it in many of the plans around the state. They're very difficult to implement. But in Rangeley, I think it could work because you all know each other and you all know each other's land. And so what you do is you're taking, so let's say somebody's got a piece of woodland out here and you want to take the development rights off of it. So you can take the development rights off, you can sell it to someone else, or you might own land in both areas. And you can get higher than what would otherwise be allowed. So, that just creates opportunities to preserve some land out here. Once you've taken the development rights off, they're gone. It's like putting a conservation easement on the land. That's another program that we thought might be something that could actually work in Rangeley. And affordable housing usually doesn't happen unless there's some sort of subsidy, either a grant or money from a TIF, an affordable housing TIF. There's usually some other source of funding that goes in, and that's what brings the price down. Now I want to get into the next bullet point about the preserve. So If you do that and you create this new housing, what you don't wanna do is have someone go in, there's been some sort of money put in, probably government money, put in to bring the cost down, for someone to be able to then go buy the house and turn around 2 months later and sell it and make $100,000, and then it's no longer affordable. So you need mechanisms in there to preserve that affordability. And that's why we've talked about either having the equivalent of a housing authority. I mean, that's what we used to call them. A lot of them are nonprofits. There is a nonprofit in the Kingfield area that has been successful in doing this, and I've talked to them. They said they'd be willing to talk to Rangeley. It's a specialized skill that's needed to oversee that the people who are moving in actually meet the qualifications, and that you preserve this affordability for season after season or owner after owner. But yet, you also want to make sure that there are provisions in there that as the market increases, that there can be some gain on that. And then we also want to make sure that if you're gonna have affordable housing, time is money, you need to have a simplified process to be able to get these projects approved. The local economy. So this right here are taxable sales. And the Maine Revenue Service tracks this. And you can see down in 2007 here, we're a little over $30 million contributing to Maine Revenue Service from the annual tax, and then it goes down. Here's the Great Recession. You know, it's taking until 2014 to recover from that. And you're going up and down a little bit, and then you get to 2019, you know, you're on a trajectory, and then it shoots. So, you know, there's a number of things that happened here. Saddleback reopened. We had COVID, and new people came into town. You also got high-speed internet in this time period, which made it easier for people to stay and still work. And so if they're working and getting a city salary from Boston or New York or wherever, and then they're spending it up here, that's good for the local economy. So things have been good. In terms of the business community. At that meeting back in January of 2024, we also asked folks what they thought in terms of industry. And in Rangeley, recreation is definitely industry. I mean, you don't typically think of that, but it is. And so folks still see recreation, hospitality, but here we have third, that remote working is actually looked at as an industry and an important industry. It's an important, it's an important new source of revenue to be spent in town. Forestry coming in fourth, we do have some suggestions on forestry and bolstering up that that industry a little bit. And then we've got technology, manufacturing, and renewable energies. So no surprise on the recreation and the hospitality. That's, you know, keep things going. That's what Rangeley is. We gotta keep that. We gotta protect that. We have to preserve that. So what do we do for the economy? Well, as I said, housing. It's housing, housing, housing. So the first thing is get more housing so that workers, and you know, we heard it from business people, we heard it from the fire department, we heard it from the school department, you know, getting police officers and firefighters and teachers and childcare workers. They want to be here, but then they try to find a place to live. and they can't. Or you do have a lot of people commuting over an hour just to get to work. So again, we've got some zoning adjustments, allowing for broader definitions for different types of recreation. You know, people we had a study, the outdoor recreation department of the, DECD in Augusta, the Department of Economic and Community Development. They spend a lot of time looking at what people like to come to Maine to do. And, you know, there's some different things that people wanna come to do. They wanna hike, but they also wanna build trails. They want to bird, they want to look at the stars. So there's some other things. They also want wellness type things. They want yoga, they want meditation, you know, they want a lot of different things. And so there's a lot of different opportunities there to, for new business, for existing business, and we want to make sure that zoning allows anything so that any entrepreneurship that we have in Rangeley for some sort of new business to capture that they're able to do that. We talked about allowing the mixed use. We adding a site plan review process. That comes up more in the next section, which is the natural resources to protect all of that water. And we need to be very careful with the regulations. Because if you have a lot of erosion, that's like pouring fertilizer into the streams and lakes. And so we want to make sure that the construction is done in a certain way that it protects the water quality. There's some new products happening with forestry. The mass timber industry, which is actually quite close to the log. So rather than a lot of processing like paper, it's fairly close to the log. And some of these are being done in such a way that they are found to be equivalent with steel. And so I talked to some forestry folks and they said, absolutely, you should allow it. Will it happen? Who knows? But if it's not allowed, then you know it won't happen. So some opportunities to get more into forestry. We talked to some farmers. And what they said, we have some new farmers, some younger farmers in town. We did have a chance to talk to them. And they said, we need to be able to try new things. So we can't, you know, we need to be able to just try things. And if we have to go through a review process and have plans developed, that's going to make it really difficult. And so we included those things in the agricultural section so that the farms could expand. Because especially it being in such a rural area, it's good to have local resources. And as I said, supporting a wide variety of outdoor uses. Whatever it is that people want to be able to do when they come here, we don't want the plan, we don't want zoning to be what stops that from happening in Rangeley if somebody wants to try it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just we don't want our rules and regulations to be barriers. We talked about roads, posting roads, big deal everywhere in Maine, it's a big deal in Rangeley. You post a road and that shuts everything down. And so working with DOT to get more roads up to the grade that they don't have to be posted was something we talked about. Saddleback has a bus system to move around their skiers and their employees. And there was some talk about maybe having the town talk to Saddleback. Maybe there's some opportunities for cooperation there. We looked at the possibility of economic development and how does that happen in Rangeley? Can that be a position, a part-time position, someone who could write grants? somebody who could help with supporting worker training programs and be a liaison between the town and Saddleback. And all businesses, but I mentioned Saddleback because it's not in Rangeley, but it really, it's very connected to the local economy. This is leading into natural resources. And when we asked people at that meeting in January, what makes Rangeley Rangeley? You know, you see, it's the outdoors, it's nature, it's outdoor heritage, wilderness, scenic, mountains, lakes, wildlife. It's all of those things. It's what brings people here. It's why people stay here, why probably a lot of you are here. And so it's important. So what do we want to do for natural resources? We need some new development standards, stormwater, erosion control, including the riparian, the areas along streams and water bodies to protect them. Regulation is challenging, but if you want to protect the water quality and have development, that's how you do it. Reducing impervious surface. So that's stuff like not requiring that folks have too much parking. You know, listening to people rather than say you need to have X number of spaces per X square feet of building. Ask people, how many parking spaces do you need? And you build accordingly. We talked about the transfer of development rights, and why is that in natural resources? Because the point there is to protect land in the rural parts of town, to protect those undeveloped parts of land. And the same thing with the cluster provisions. The town does have clustered provisions. They've been around for quite a while. There are not, I think there's been 2 or maybe 2 housing developments who have used those provisions. And what they do is they allow you to have the same number of lots, but you can have it in a smaller area. So you reduce the amount of road that you have to build. And then these houses are surrounded by open space. So while they might not own that big lot, they're surrounded by it. And so what I'm told is that the reason that there's only 2 of them is that the map isn't quite right in the zone. So it needs to be looked at. There's been some discussion about protecting views. And also some about limiting light pollution to have more dark sky opportunities. Training. So we can regulate, but unless there's somebody, unless the contractors know what they're supposed to do and homeowners know what they're supposed to do, chances are the erosion can happen. You get a big storm and all of a sudden, boom, it's done. And it's too late. You can't go back and fix it. You can fix it, but you can't fix the damage that's happened. So what we're talking about is a training program for contractors so that everyone knows what the rules are. The state has a lot of best management practices that they've used for years. And so if the contractors have an incentive to get certified in best management practices and follow those practices, then you don't have to be as heavy on the regulation. And that would also hold true with public works too, because they're out in the ditches, they're out on the roads, and so, getting folks trained on what to do is something that we want to do. And inspection. I think inspection is huge. You need civil engineers out on sites, inspecting sites to make sure that they're being built according to the plan and that they're following those practices. Again, it's to protect the water bodies. inspecting septic systems before in shoreland areas. So sometimes somebody goes in and they, there was a small camp and then they built something bigger and they may or may not have updated their septic system. So septic systems close to the lake or any water body that are malfunctioning is one of the worst situations you can have, because it's like dumping fertilizer into the lake. And so this suggests that if you're gonna sell a house and you're in a shoreland area, not everywhere, but you're in a shoreland area, so any one of the lakes, the ponds, streams, that you would need to have an inspection done of your septic system, make sure it's been pumped and that it's functioning properly. And then some education, we've got invasive species, we've got it on land, we've got it getting into the water. We need to make sure that everyone is up to date on what those are and how to stop that from happening. We also looked at municipal services. And we need to look at, Rangeley, the town of Rangeley provides a lot of, services to the surrounding plantations, which makes a lot of sense. So, but that increases their calls. It also increases the time that they need to respond because it's just so much farther away. So we talked about the need to evaluate the buildings. Are they adequate for the uses and the services to make sure that everything we're keeping up with current needs? The town does capital improvements planning, and this is saying, good job, keep doing that. The town does have some impact fees. Sometimes that's another way to raise money for certain projects. And so that's always something to look at. We spend a lot of time talking about healthcare services. It's tricky. Comprehensive plans don't usually deal with healthcare services. That's not something I'm trained to do. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that, and providing healthcare in rural areas is complicated. You don't have, you're 45 minutes from a hospital. And so we did come up with some ideas. I know Joe has worked with a group that is looking at rural health in the region and other rural parts of the state, because you are not alone in that. And so the healthcare services is a big issue, and the plan just says that it identifies the problem. It's a little short on solutions, because that's gotta come from other areas. But what we can do, what the town can do, is just make sure that there's space available if certain uses are gonna happen and they need town space until they can get established someplace else, or not have some restriction in zoning that wouldn't allow them. We looked at our historic resources, a few things that we talked about there was documenting some of the historic resources. In terms of new developments, it is fairly common to have the Maine State Historic Commission write a letter on historic resources if some sort of development is happening. There was some talk about having an education program, having some signage around town, to talk about the past. And then with all of the nonprofits, there's always that, how can the town be involved in a very low cost way to advance these cultural activities and resources. Climate. So the state suggests that we write a climate plan. And so we did write a climate chapter, and then I was putting them all together and I left it out. I have it, we did it. I woke up one morning and said, I didn't put the climate chapter in, and sure enough, I was right, I didn't. But it is not required, so you will see it on the website as a separate document. One of the things that it has in it that, I personally found quite, fascinating was there's a NOAA station up at the airport. And they have been collecting data up there for decades. And so I got their temperature data and their precipitation data since 2010 and put it into a spreadsheet. And so there's a lot of charts and graphs there. And then I put a trend line in so you can see where things are going. Me and my family, we come to Rangeley every July. And as it turns out, what I found is that the rainiest month in Rangeley right now is July. And we all agree that that was right. So, the climate chapter also talks about weatherization, improving, improving insulation, lowering heating costs, cooling costs. Having provisions for, renewable energy, if that's what you want. And then we talked about these extreme weather events. And so how do we prepare for them? What happens during them when you had, a couple of years ago when Rangeley was basically an island? How do you deal with that? So that chapter is there. I think it should be part of the plan. It would be my recommendation to put it into the plan. And the reason for that is that it would allow, should some grant opportunity come up to do maybe some looking at resiliency, looking at roads. We've done the water and sewer utilities have done a study to make sure to see which parts of their facilities might be at risk. Doing that with roads, getting culverts, finding places, fixing them before the weather event does it. So, so I think it should be part of it, but that's not my decision. It doesn't have to be in there, but it's something for us to think about. So where are we now? I talked about the climate section. We did submit it to the state for their review. So I talked about at the very beginning, the consistency review. It's really important that you have that. It's one of the reasons why you go to take the effort, the cost to get this done so that you can have that, because it opens up opportunities for funding. It is at the state now. We may get some comments from them. We don't know. We haven't heard anything yet. And that might require a few adjustments here or there. There is a checklist that you can opt to fill out. I did fill it out. It looks like I think we covered everything, but you never know. And then we have the approval at the town meeting, which is August 19th. So, that's where we're at for that. And it's your turn. So, sorry, I talked more than I wasn't supposed to talk.
Was there a timeline for the state review of that?
They have 45 days. And we are probably at, we're in the 30s right now. Because we sent it into the state right away. Because we wanted to get that with the town meeting schedule, and we wanted to make sure that we had time to make changes before and still be able to keep all of that on track. Questions?
I just have a comment, with regards to downtown. It's it's not so much, I don't have a solution to this, but to me, it seems like to be a little bit of a problem. There seems to be a fair amount of commercial property that's downtown, that's just sitting. People have bought this property and it's prime real estate in the town. It's commercially zoned in the town. It provides an opportunity there for somebody to do something with the property, because as the population continues to expand, people are gonna want more services, they're gonna want more, things to do, and they're gonna want, from a broad standpoint, competition is a good thing for all of us, okay? It keeps everybody honest. And I wish that there was an incentive to some of these properties that are just sitting there from the town to approach these owners and say, listen, this is a prime piece of real estate. There's people that want to invest in this town, but there's no real estate available to do that. And if it was a situation where you said, listen, we'll give you a tax incentive to do something with this property. Or, and I don't want to go too far with my comments, but if it say, listen, it's a finite schedule. We're gonna offer you this for a finite period of time. And so it kind of jumpstarts people to say, listen, here's a good opportunity for me to redevelop this property. I've looked, tried to find something in town, and it's virtually impossible to find it. And I don't know if it's a situation where you would start to look at expanding the commercial zone, whether it be towards the Aquatic end or towards the other end. And I'm not familiar with what that entails, but boy, it just seems like there's a lot of property that's just kind of sitting there. Not that it's a lot, it's just from a percentage standpoint, given how much property is in town to begin with. And I don't have an answer for it, but I'd love to see, more. I'd love to see more for rent signs, because I really think, or for sale signs. But I really think that there's people that are coming to this town with a fair amount of money who would love to invest and plant their feet here and provide something to the community.
So, I just want to make sure that I understand you right. There are vacancies downtown. Is that what you're saying? But they're just sitting there.
Right,
And you'd like to see some action happen.
right. And I'm not calling anybody out or anything, but the one that comes to mind is the old IGA building, for example.
Yeah.
It's sitting there. I know it's in the floodplain because I've looked at it, but something should be done with that. What I don't know, but it increases the tax base. If that property is redeveloped into a multi-billion-dollar community project, then it increases our tax base. And chances are it's going to give an opportunity for everybody in the community, whether they're here full-time, like most of us or all of us, or whether they're here part-time. It's going to give them an opportunity to spend money at another location. That's all.
Right. And the first thing I always like to do is there's someone, have people tried to do something, but the zoning doesn't allow it, because that we can fix if it's something that's desirable. So, good point.
And that's where, where planning comes in. We've got a code enforcement officer that sits on this board. I handle a number of real estate transactions. It's one of the benefits of having a tax increment financing district. And is that someone can apply for a credit enhancement agreement, which gives them a break on taxes for X period of time pending approving at town meeting. But this would be something that, conversations with code enforcement officers are confidential, something that perhaps he could share with the town manager that would eventually come through in an appropriate avenue. But that's a great point, because, we've gone through these waves where, these properties just seem to sit, suddenly get bought up and
Nothing.
nothing.
Right, exactly.
But the tax increment financing district, which is downtown Rangeley and Aquatic, is fairly new. But it was approved at town meeting, 2-3 years ago, Joe?
3 or 4, yeah.
Kind of controversial, it was a big step for Rangeley, big change. And, but it is a tool that we have to assist those whose goals are appropriate that go along with the downtown
Yeah.
plan. So great, great point.
We also, just a follow-up to that, is that we also put in the consider areas that we put in various parts in the plan is facade improvement, low interest loans. City of Portland did that years ago where they had a number of blighted buildings where they offered
Right.
a low interest loan, but they encouraged people to do those improvements that needed to be done to their building, but they might not be able to get through a traditional financing with that there. But we've left that, it's in the consider, leaving it in the hands of the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board and ordinance to look at those type of things. But we did discuss the buildings that haven't been redeveloped, but there's been a lot of buildings that have been
They have.
redeveloped in the past. If you walk through here in 2008 compared to where you are now,
I know.
on a lot of things, and a lot of people in this room have done a lot with that stuff. Joe?
Yes, I just have, the state approval of the plan, the development plan, they have 45 days. And if they recommend a change, does it start all over again, or do you order?
Well, if they recommend a change, it would be because some aspect of the plan that they thought it was really important was not addressed.
Okay, so then it goes back to the state,
So then it goes back to the committee,
and then the state has to approve it again.
yes.
So you're it's like a daisy chain there.
There's some uncertainty in the process, yes.
Now, the other thing, one of the other things is, I can remember when, it's the recycling center. And that was going to be, I think it intends some industrial development, I think they were gonna. That's available, that's it. Now, the other day I visited the place. I never knew there were so many house lots out there. Right, so. Question is. If you go on economic development, let's say a wood pellet or wood block factory. Where are you gonna? What is the person who has this little cabin in the woods, right? They look at the birds, they go fishing. Next thing they know. Somebody like company that I used to work for is gonna cut down all those trees and make it black. Okay, you're gonna put a big building, industrial building. That's not gonna happen. It'd be a war. And then my last point is. You gotta make this town somehow a destination town. So. And that. Takes. Let's say. Paths, trails, stuff like that, people that wanna come, that wanna do that particular thing. And events like a fishing tournament or whatever, anything that connects with the availability of what's people come here to do, promote it. And I remember, what was it, a year ago, 2 years ago? To make the town a tourist, which is it has to be that to generate income. They buried the utilities underground. I knew it was, I didn't think it was gonna happen because of the expense. But it's something that has to be done. What's that town that's banked by Sunday River there, really, Christmas? Yeah, okay. Rangeley's not that. No, maybe they don't want that, but if you want to improve property values, they generate a tax revenue. That's what it is. You're not gonna have Ford Motor Company come up here and build that. Yeah. I'm building, wait a minute, we'll put it this way, build an environmentally friendly car. Just, it's not gonna.
A wooden car.
Yeah, a car out of wood that runs on batteries that get from the sun and you don't really put lake water in it and it turns it. Okay, I'm big facetious, so.
Joe, the industrial zone is still in place, which is up by the airport section.
Yeah,
That hasn't changed. When the other housing developments have been done up there, Ramsey North, and a couple of those, they specifically delineate the areas which are still on that, it's on their site plans.
Yeah.
They're industrial, those pieces. The challenge has been the town's always wanted to try to have some more industrial stuff, but the simple fact is, a lot of those heavier type of mechanisms that would do the normal industrial, it's a 75-minute drive to the nearest
That's, yeah,
highway. So for large trucks to be able to do that, we did look at, though we did talk quite a bit about in the forestry, because we have all these trees. We have all these trucks that are taking all the trees out of here.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we can look at something that can be done in the forestry industry? Where things could be turned from raw material trees into
Yeah,
some kind of
value
widgets, and then the widgets can go down the hill as well as not just the pulp.
my-
So those are the type of things that we did discuss that are in the plan, those suggestions, and
yeah.
you bring up some great points.
The problem is with that, you gotta get the people who live around that area, would build houses around there. After this plan that was gonna go in over there. I don't think you would succeed by both. I don't,
Well, we haven't had anything that's come up with that recently, but I mean, I think that's why we've written a plan that in the way, so that way those discussions can happen and those decisions can be made as a community there, but we put in the core backbone pieces to say, you know, consider this, those type of things. Because I think we all know that quite a bit, you know, the two big resources that leave our community on a regular basis is water and trees.
Yeah.
And so if there's a way to do something along those lines where that it can be turned into a higher value product in this community and create jobs, that I would think that would be something in general that people would be in support of, as long as we can find that balance between nature and industry.
and I don't wanna hog you, but there's two more things. Landowners that are not resident, are they allowed to vote in the town meeting, not? Or,
You're getting a no from Joe.
No, you have to be a registered voter, a resident of the town.
There is a bill in the legislature that's been proposed, but as you know, many bills get proposed.
okay,
But there is a bill that I've seen recently that was proposed, but I don't know if, I know we have someone
and
from the legislature
my-
tonight, maybe. can
my
get
last
some-
statement. If people remember, 5 years ago, maybe 6, 7. When the logging happened. We had a severe weather, rainstorm basically. And the river. It turned brown, and it was like that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I was told that there was no silt fence, no enforcement. I don't know what town, I don't know what it was, in this city of Rangeley, town of Rangeley? I don't know, it was where Yale was.
Well, that's why, you know, there's
But
talk
it was
of
not
more
enforced.
inspection.
It was not enforced, that's the thing about it, okay?
Yeah.
And I talked to, forest rangers. And the answer I was given was that the silt fence would not work. That's not the law. You put the silt fence up, if it doesn't work, hey, if it's.
Well, it
You
works,
can't-
it might not work in an extreme
Yes,
situation.
whether it works or
but-
not has nothing to do with not having silt. You have to put the silt fence up. If the thing floods up the next day and it's determined that you did the proper procedure to put it in, you're off the hook. That's no.
So we're getting a little bit off the rails here, Joe, on that part, so let's, I think
Okay,
we'll try to
yeah.
go back in, you brought up some.
The
good
thing is,
points.
I got enforcement of regulations.
We've talked about enforcement in those pieces, and, we're gonna reel back in so we can give everybody a chance to talk. We had a couple more questions.
My question is regarding this, the surrounding communities, does this also include part of Oxford County? Because it's all part of the same region. Is it a regional plan or specific to Rangeley?
This plan is specific to Rangeley. In the course of our going out and fact finding, we went to the surrounding communities. We went down as far as Kingfield to see what they're doing. And what they're, because we found that there were opportunities to work together on things.
So my question is, if the voters vote to adopt this comprehensive plan, are they also voting to adopt that proposed zoning amendment?
Yes, it is part of the plan. This is the future land use plan. It is part of the plan, therefore, yes,
So they go hand in hand, one vote.
yes.
Okay, so,
However, the zoning doesn't actually get changed until we have a formal vote on the zoning is what's
Right.
proposed.
That's the suggestion.
All it is it's saying, this is what we think would make sense. You still have to draft the zoning and say, these
so
laws,
then at a town.
There'll be
meeting,
another
there'll be
bite at-
Separate vote on changing.
there'll be another bite at the apple.
Proposed zoning.
Right.
There'll be another bite at the apple mark. And then Rob, I think, is that it for you? Do you have another question? You all set?
Anything
We're
else?
gonna go to Rob.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, Rob.
I got a bit short too, I got yesterday, no, but I'm Rob Welch, on Pleasant Street in Bed and Breakfast. I chaired the last comprehensive plan. It was a very thorough examination of what this town felt was critical. We had some non-negotiables in the last plan, and clean water was top of the list. Everyone knew the value of that in regards to everything we've talked about. You don't have the best water, you don't have the best of anything. And so I just want to make that point, if I wasn't hearing anything about what the committee felt were pretty strong non-negotiables. I don't need to hear it now, I'm just bringing that point up. Because if you really are gathering what is important to people, ultimately, they're gonna tell you what is their non-negotiable. And, we were able to come up with that in the last comprehensive plan. The next thing is I want to mention about is we talk about downtown zoning and empty buildings, which are all important stuff. In the bed and breakfast business, I hear what people like about Rangeley. It's not Old Orchard Beach. It's not Moosehead Lake. It's not that, it's Rangeley. And that's the ethos of our community. If we don't understand what that is, you will lose it. And we'll be gray like everyone else. I didn't hear that either. So I'm curious about that piece of the philosophy of what is the critical components that make us what we are. And sometimes it's theoretical for sure, but it's also a gut feeling. And I know that feeling because my guests tell me about that. Last thing I want to comment on is the plan. Number one, hard work. I know it took us almost 3 years the last time. It's also expensive, and it needs to be a document, bottom line, in my view. It said in here, this is just recommend, kind of the select board's direction. When I was a selectman for 2 terms and worked with many of you, you would hear me say, where does this fit in the comprehensive plan? It's gonna cost money. Where does it fit? And how do we evaluate that component? Is one way that the public can ask you, the elected officials, show me where it fits. It's gonna cost money, it's gonna raise taxes. What is the value of that to me as a resident of Rangeley? I'm disappointed in the language that was basically, well, it's kind of a recommendation, it's the comprehensive plan. It's not the comprehensive wish list, or I kind of like this, I kind of like that. It's a plan. And I'm looking for language in it that is more direct. And that every citizen can say to the select board, whoever it is in town office, where does it fit? If it doesn't fit, okay, but someone needs a reason to hear that. Because this is a lot of work.
Right.
It's a lot of work. It's a very, very valuable document for this community over the next 10 years. And so I compliment you on your work. I like very much listening to the reviews, but those are some of my immediate feelings that I would want to express to all of you.
Those are great points, Rob, and I spent a lot of time, I remember I gave you my booklet from when I had worked on the town of Wyndham in the early 2000s. Well, since then, the state planning office has gone away, and there's been some different guidelines on that. And there's been some also things that have happened in state law and those type of things where the comp plan is more supposed to be now so more by a guideline, and it allows the local enforcement to be able to mold and shape it accordingly to what needs to be done. I don't think anything's been lost on the prior stuff. We even went back and Mark got us a plan from, I think, what was the 90s?
97.
97, we reviewed the 97 plan. And we also went through line by line as a task list of every specific recommendation that was in there and said, has anything been done on this in 12 years? Does it still need to be addressed? what is missing in those things. We've gone down, we filtered down through all that. And I think the 8 or 9 things that Donna brought up in the beginning, one of them was natural resources and stuff. I think that encompasses the water part there. We just tried to form it in a way that, not to water it down, but to allow things to shape in the right way so that we can, one, go for grants to help with some of these non-negotiable hard cost things to go after some grant money, but also to allow our elected officials and our elected board members to work within the guidelines that are out there. I think I don't know if you had a chance to read it, because they're not, but the vision part, which Steve worked quite a bit on, and so did Wendy and Donna, and everyone gave it a good thorough read. I think that 3 or 4, normally a vision statement's a paragraph with a nonprofit or a sentence or 2. That particular document, and we got quite a bit of input from the select board on that, especially Sam. That I think encompasses really well that ethos that you're talking about. So I suggest maybe give it
Yeah.
a deeper peruse. And I think
I
you brought up some great
I
points.
like all that, I get all that.
Okay,
The point is, does the rest of the community get that? And one thing they have is a tool in their hand that they can read at their camp and say, oh, look what this says here. I'm gonna go ask Jimmy, what's going on with this? I just read this in the comp plan. What is blah, blah, blah. You know, it gives them a direction. I'm someone that likes to read something and say, this is the direction with our community in people's input has said, we're gonna move in these directions. Okay, and if we don't move, I think the community has the right to say, what are you guys doing up there? I mean, that's a fair question. Okay, so I'm looking for a document that gives everyone in our community something to read, something to understand, something maybe not to understand, but ask the right questions. And when they're not seeing what they feel the intent was, they have enough information to ask you directly what's going on. And I, when I was a selectman, I said it many times, you know, budgets go up, things are more expensive, everybody wants their taxes to go down, What are we gonna do? Where does this fit in the comp plan that's gonna cost us money? Why are we doing it? And be able to respond to the community of why that's being a priority.
right. And one of the goals that didn't happen last time, which we're hoping to have happen this time, is once the comp plan is accepted in that, technically you have about 18 months.
Yeah.
To get those ordinances in line. And we already have an ordinance committee that's been working very hard on a lot of things, so we're gonna have to get some extra help on that. But that didn't necessarily happen last time, and that's where we ran into some legal challenges.
Right.
Because the comp plan said one thing, the ordinance said different.
Right.
People made some determinations, and of course, you get 2 lawyers in a room, you get 5 opinions.
We spent a lot of time
And-
to figure that out.
Right, so we're hoping that, you know, we really worked hard at trying to look at the historical context and say, okay, what can we learn from our mistakes? So we can go forward, and we spent a lot of time with going back and forth with the select board, because they're the ones that are getting those direct comments
Right.
versus us as a committee who's kind of working separately. But Cindy?
I just want to say, if there are specific comments, we're all here to listen to you, but not just tonight. I mean, this plan is being reviewed. Joe, what's the best way for them to provide specific feedback?
They can email me directly, my email address is on the website.
Yeah,
Manager at Rangeley.
but just if there is something that is like, oh, this it needs to be a little clearer, please let us know. That's why we want it.
And I do appreciate time, the effort, you know, it's a big job. And it's an important document. To me, it's one of the most important documents that we come to have for the next 10 years. And it's a working document. They can be taken back up at town meeting and revised over time too, as if conditions change and so forth. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great comments.
so
Thank you.
and thank you for your hard work.
Anyone else before I go back to Mark? Mark?
I was just wondering what the length of time for the comment period is where you still have time to.
Well, we're still waiting to hear back from the state. Donna, do you want to speak to that?
I mean, we're waiting to hear back from the state, but I would say, you know, there is no time established for this, but I would say if you have comments, get it to us in the next 10 days.
We'd like to have the finalized, if we're gonna try to vote on the sixteenth, we need, I think, 30 days before to have that finalized there. So
Right.
really, first week of July would be ideal to get those back, so we can meet one more time and dot
Because
the i's across the t.
every time we change it, we need to hold another one of these meetings, and
Right.
we need to give a 30-day notice.
And that's why I was asking.
So we are running out of time,
Yeah.
but if we have to
So a week and a
postpone,
half or so.
Yeah. yeah,
Is the
I'll
town meeting
express
date,
your mind.
is the town meeting date firmly established, can't be changed?
They have one set for that. If it doesn't work out, then we'll have to bump them. We were originally gonna try to go June with this, but then we moved it
Yeah,
out because we felt we needed more time. We got some really good comments. We wanted to make sure those got incorporated. We're at this point now where we're 12, 13 years out on our plan, so we are technically not in compliance. So we would like to move in that direction to get it wrapped up, but by no means do we want to run everybody over.
Do you have any idea how much my taxes are gonna go up if you have all these things that you want, like the housing authority, transportation, and these different improvements and inspections? I wanna know what it's gonna cost.
I can't give you that.
We don't have a fiscal note tied to those things, and again, a lot of those are suggestions. It's gonna be up to our elected officials to decide what gets implemented and not, which they will have public hearings on those pieces and do that.
I don't mean a dollar amount, I mean like how many taxes are gonna go up 30% or something.
It all depends. I mean, we have a significant fund balance and those type of things that are also being used to help mitigate with the tax and those pieces. So I'd be better probably for you to comment on that.
There's so many variables on that, you
I
know.
understand that,
If you have more commercial development, it usually offsets that. If you have a lot of young families moving in with new kids, with young kids, then, you know, you've got costs associated like with that. So it all depends. I can't take a guess at that.
Like the school budget makes up $5 or $6 million of the whole budget.
Yeah.
And for instance, Dallas this year had an influx of more students, so that's gonna have an impact on their taxes, which is completely outside of anything that's controlled with a comp plan. or anything else.
no
There's
complaints.
a lot of different variables, but
And
It's
the
a good
school
question.
expenses, every town has that.
Yeah.
I don't have kids in the school system, I did. And so I pay my part of the taxes for my school, and that doesn't bother me, that's fine, that's an expense. Being part of a community. But when I have to supply housing for businesses.
This,
so that
this
they don't
plan
pay
doesn't,
to help enough to live here.
this plan
That's
doesn't
why-
create anything. It's a plan for the next 10 years that each of the boards in the town have to look at and then propose solutions in line with what this plan says. So this plan doesn't change anything. All the details will be looked at in the future, and maybe they decide they're good ideas and maybe they do cause changes. Maybe the boards and the public say this no longer, you know, is a problem in 2 or 3 years and we don't even need to address it.
But it does propose a direction for the town to grow.
Right.
And I don't believe this, there's gotta be somebody in town who doesn't want any growth.
Sure,
So they like the way the town was 50 years ago.
sure.
What about their considerations?
well, those will be covered in a couple of different ways. One is if there's any zoning changes, that will get voted on through our town meeting format. If there's any kind of tax increment financing or credit enhancement agreements, we just had one that just got voted on recently, that's voted on in the town meeting format. Any of those type of significant expenses are prepared in a warrant and then presented to the town to vote on. So it isn't, the comp plan adoption doesn't necessarily create a
Expense.
fund or a cost on the town. It's more of a layout of potential suggestions, which actually by doing some of these updates can make us, like she talked about in the beginning of the presentation, eligible for grants. So if we decide to look at something, we actually may be able to go out and get state and federal money to cover a chunk of that part if we choose to go in that direction.
So when
There's
you,
more bites at the apple. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily what
but
this,
when you get some of these grants, there's gonna be strings attached.
there always are with
Transportation thing, they might tell you that you need a solar powered bus. some odd thing where it's gonna cost twice as much money.
I'm not sure if that'll happen under the current administration, but I appreciate your comment.
I just mean, anything that you can't even imagine is gonna be
Yeah, and I think we're going,
associated with the grant.
I get your point. I think you brought up some excellent points there, but I think we're going a little bit farther down into the what ifs here that. What I'm saying is that regardless of when the comp plan is approved, there's still other additional bites at the apple to deal with any capital expenditures, which would have a direct impact on your tax bills, and that will be done through our elected officials and our various boards, and those type of things. So there will be a chance to have further comment on that at that point. What we're trying to do now is set up a general guide that we're able to use from if we want to take advantage of various programs and grants that are out there, and to look at what we can do to make sure the further vision, or as Rob said, ethos of Rangeley can continue.
Do you have a grant? Individual and person experience in applying for these?
We've
grants?
used several consultants in the past and probably will
Yeah,
continue
you
to
do
do
have
so.
somebody there.
I just would like to be educated on, if this is not the venue, where or what addresses the healthcare services needs that this community needs to be a tourist company.
Well, we talked, that was probably the number one subject. Steve brought that up in the very first meeting. We started that conversation, and we've documented as Donna has mentioned, we're 10 years on average age older in this town than any else in Franklin County, and 15 years older than the average of the state. So we know that there's a need there. There's been several discussions in the past. There's some stuff going on in the legislature, which is going to allow, I think, some more flexibility with the health center as far as being able to distribute pharmaceutical drugs and those type of things. It is an important priority, and we've discussed it at length on the comp plan, but we have to put certain things in the comp plan in order to then kick that engine into effect. Will we end up with a Rumford Hospital, something of that size? I don't necessarily see that we will ever get to that point. Jackman, they're going through it now. They're spending $525,000 this current year just to have 24/7 paramedics that are available to their community to have that type of thing. So there's a number of different options that can be looked at going forward. But what we're trying to do with the comp plan is at least lay out and say, hey, there's an issue here. Hey, our population's aging, and we need to try to do what we can to protect our citizens and be able to deal with urgent care as well as preventative care on a good basis.
So
And
it's not in a written report, but it's on the table.
It's
it's in the written
Oh, I
report.
thought she said it was- that
Well,
wasn't what
there's
the-
no,
The solution is
There's no formal plan, but
Yeah,
there's.
the solution.
You address that there's a problem.
Right.
We address that there's a problem. It's gotta be, it's gotta be done more with, I mean, the comprehensive plan is more land use and when we start getting into healthcare and rural healthcare, that's when we really need the help from the state and what some options are. I was just reading in Waterville, for example, the hospital is closing there, and Waterville made an emergency decision to hire 2 new paramedics and get, I think, 1 more ambulance, a significant expense to the city. So, there's different ways. We talked about some options. We talked about paramedics, but that's as far as the plan could take it. But, yes, we had several
We
discussions.
talked about expanding the hours of the health facility here in Rangeley to 24/7. Try to find a way to encourage full-time doctor here, things of that nature that the town may or may not be able to do, or can provide incentives to make that happen, or partner with private sector to make it happen. So I was very much focused around that. It would be the kind of thing that might keep me from living here full-time soon at some point. Because, you know, I mean, a lot of us might not be able to wait an hour to get to the hospital. So there
Well,
needs
it's
to
not
be
just,
that.
not just in an emergency. I mean, I'm a full-time resident now and, you know, I don't mind the drive to Farmington. I've had to go to the hospital and take family members there. We just know that. And unfortunately, we could drive the person versus get the ambulance. But to go for dental care, to go for any kind of specialist, it's Portland, it's Augusta,
Blood
it's
work.
Bangor, you know, and surgeries have to be performed there and whatnot. And then routinely, they would order, visiting nurses to come in for a few weeks, post-op, check incisions, blah, blah. Well, that supposedly happened out of a Rumford agency who no longer covers Rangeley.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes. A lot of things have happened with Maine Health. Maine Health took over Franklin Memorial Hospital. Then it made a material change in what we had for standard specialists that were there that have now been farmed out and tied into the Maine Health Network. Significant changes. Just to give some perspective and not to knock the 2012 plan, but there was only a paragraph or so that discussed that in the 12 plan. We took a lot more time on that. Steve was on that like
Yeah.
first meeting. He's like, there's only a paragraph.
That's not to fall apart.
That's pretty, I'm not moving,
Yeah.
but I'm not getting younger either.
Yeah.
And there's gotta be more than just this one, family member that's having a surgery and we're taking care of them, but.
And there's a big challenge on the state level too, with funding
Oh, I
for
know that.
hospitals right now and a lot of things there, and that's also predicating what's available in the rural care, but. We do have it as a focus as much as the housing focus and those.
Humane at Farmington's also focusing on a rural health program. And that when I talk about partnering with other organizations, it might be worthwhile to talk with Farmington University about deploying resources here as well.
Right.
So these things could happen over the next 10 years. We have to take that horizon and look out there and something between now and then. So.
Nancy?
Yeah, I really appreciate that the plan doesn't, it's not a document that executes any of its programs. But in the execution, it does make it not, common knowledge what the town could use or appreciate for outside investors or anybody else who's looking to come in. One of the things, so I wonder if the town or some structure couldn't take control of. Long-term care facilities are incredibly lucrative. They are without a doubt one of the easiest things, even though they're expensive. But you've got Medicare, Medicaid, whatever, those are all covered. And it might be a good starting point. It certainly fits with all of the aging out that we're doing. It breaks my heart to see couples get split up and, spouses have to go to Oxford or something, they can never be seen again. When they reach a certain age, but these kind of facilities, but it would take somebody to either commandant a parcel of land and maybe do bids on it, try and get some of these people to bid on. There's also some new cutting edge concepts, especially in rural towns, where they take a concept like that and they also create living quarters. They bring in younger people. They create a whole small little community that takes care of elders, also has maybe some of your workers in it. I'm kind of thinking there's an idea where we're not putting the money down, but we're kind of soliciting bids somehow to see if we can get one of these companies interested in.
I think that's fantastic, fantastic. We talked a little bit about long-term care and that there was a need for a facility here. I think Sam also brought that up too.
They just work, if you had somebody wanted to build them, or if you had a
Right.
contractor, whoever, an investor or a group of investors, it would do well.
A great example was the old Deku farm, which is in, I don't know if you know where that is. It's when you get down to where, easy to tell now, where Domino's Pizza is now built, is a road that goes back way to the high school. They
Right.
built the Woodlands Memory Unit down. That was a farm field.
Yeah,
And that got rally put together, and that has been a great solution because there was only really two or three nursing
Yeah.
homes.
I mean.
The Pierce House can serve 10 people.
And it would
that's
kind
it.
of bring a nexus of healthcare people,
Right, it
and
would,
who knows where.
it would drive the other
Yeah,
pieces.
Yeah,
and then Mark, you had a question about City, or do you have more on that?
I have something more on that topic. My hometown is Bridgeton, and
yeah.
they have, but it was with the help of a credit enhancement agreement through their tax increment financing program. And, we've got the kernels that could, where someone, if there was attractive land available, of course, it can't be outside of Rangeley. But that credit enhancement agreement was key to that developer being able to make that long-term care facility, that tiered assisted living facility work. And we.
Would it be like a committee or something that would get put in the?
Town of Rumford just pulled this off. They have, town of Rutherford just pulled this off. They've got a 75-bed facility that's going in. The town manager spoke at the outdoor economic summit. I was there. And he's willing to come and talk to us about what his whole focus is everyone goes, I don't want my taxes to go up. His answer is, then you need to find a way to increase the tax base
Yeah.
because expenses still go up. And then
And
this would
not-
increase the
not
tax.
taxes too. We haven't really seen the full effect of all of the new buyers
Right.
and new developers of all properties. In
Valuations.
and surrounding, values are going up, more property taxes are being paid. I can't imagine that mill rates are going to increase in this town, and I would think that there's gonna be more money available for some of the services that we're gonna need.
We're scheduled for what, full valuation for next year, 2026. So I think that's you're gonna see that really show it, because it's been a long, how many years? Has it been?
Yeah,
Well,
and not to get people's like hopes up, but I think all these things that we need, there's a reason why we need it. There's more people here, there's more taxes going into the coffers. There's more resources for us to unlock and use on great ideas. We just need to figure out like which one first.
And we're doing 200 something permits a year, Carl, is that?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's-
so I mean, if you think about the average home now is selling for quite a
my
bit of
gosh,
money.
yeah. Yeah,
It
but that's-
should, it should balance out, I would
Right,
think.
I mean, the bad side, the price is going up, and then there's the good side, the price is going up.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, more money in the town to do something with it. So,
All set, Nance?
yeah, we-
Okay.
Two things. One, just to add to that, is that, with increased tax revenue, some people on fixed income are hoping taxes will go down, not that the town will dream up ways to spend every bit of new revenue they take in. And, the other thing, back to the, proposed land use plan, I've mentioned that, on the town's webpage, the proposed village areas come out dark red like you see in front of you, so you can't see the hash mark.
We'll
and
get
you
that
can't
fixed.
See where the area is actually expanded, so, I was just wondering if you could take another stab at putting one on that would show the.
Well, what we could do is maybe have Avcog do a blow up of that and then tweak the color, so that way you can see it better, just that red area. You
Right.
can see the streets.
So that one's nice and clear, but that one you can't tell the difference
Right.
between what's proposed. and
You
what's
can do it in the
existing.
CIF.
And there is one at the town office in the council.
I'm just thinking people that look on the, everyone tells them, you know, go to the town webpage,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, so when they go, they should
Well,
find something they can.
Ethna says Breck was able to do it for us, and maybe he can blow it up, for the rest of us get it to Tracy and she can get it up on the website, and we can get that info, so that's a great comment.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think you've done a good job.
keep the comments coming.
Yeah, don't be afraid, if you think of something 2 AM, when you get home, send us an email, you want it out. We're not perfect.
Town manager at Rangeley, have you done?
Yeah, sorry, I'll be the last guy as of tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. You want to adjourn? No. Yeah.